Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think I need to tell you very much about my guest today, so I'm going to plunge right in. Nandita Das, I'm going to start with you. You were, when you burst on the scene, regarded as possibly the finest actress of your generation. Commercial cinema chased you. You had a huge, huge career ahead of you in art cinema. But you made what, 2 films in the last 10 years? Instead, you've shifted to direction, which seems to be a real passion. So tell us about that choice.
I stumbled upon acting, so it was, neither a dream or an ambition. And I'd done my master's in social work, and I was working with NGOs, and I was quite happy with it. And then after doing Fire, I realized that suddenly people were calling you to functions like this, and you had to speak about things. And I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about things you care for. So for the longest time, I remained an hesitant actor, an actor who thought that, films was more a means to an end. It just gave me opportunities through my films and through other platforms that it offered to talk about things. But I think when you're on various sets, and some sets where you think, I could tell that story better, I have to admit sometimes you feel that. And also there are stories that compel you to sort of tell them. So for me, Firak, my first film, happened after the Gujarat carnage in 2002, and it was the first time we were seeing images on television of that violence. And what I was more intrigued by was that when the obvious violence finishes, everything that lingers on, just the prejudice, the anger, the emptiness, and all these emotions is what I wanted to really represent. And that's how Firak was born in 2008. And it wasn't distributed very well. I was very disappointed, and I thought, God, I put everything into it, and I'm never going to direct again because I'm done with that. And then in 2012, it was Manto's centenary, and I read Manto, and I felt he was so relevant to our times, and I was just grabbed by him, and I kept reading him, and I said, no, I'm going to make a film on Manto. And in 2018, I made the film Manto. So both of them were very sort of organically were born, and the new one, Zwigato, was born during the pandemic, where you have these contactless deliveries, and I was just, wondering that this whole gig economy that has made our life so convenient, we don't even know who they are, what their life is. They are not from the traditional working spaces. They are left on their own with their app and their phone. So it was that desire to kind of make these people who are hidden in plain sight more visible. So that's how Zwigato was born. So till now, it was just far more organic, but now, literally now after Zwigato, I feel that maybe this is what I really want to do, is to tell stories and, take filmmaking a little more seriously.
You really should.
Yes, you should.
Not a coming from Mira, I should.
You are a real director.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I saw that in Firak and certainly in Manto, so you shouldn't be casual about it. You are
that's
a director.
Praise, huh? Coming from
Mira
Mira.
is somebody, obviously, I grew up, watching, admiring. She's also a friend. We've met many times. So yeah, like coming from her, definitely it's something.
I'm also born and raised in Orissa, which is
so we have this Odia connection as well.
Sorigola, Morigola.
Mira, directors rarely become household names. Actors and actresses do. You're not just a household name in India, but if you ask Americans who Mira Nair is, and if they're interested in cinema at all, the chances are they will know. It's a very unique position for a director to be so well regarded in India, and to be so well regarded in the most competitive film industry in the world, in America. And you've done this pretty much on your own terms. You're still a director. She talked about doing things that she wanted to do. And you, like Nandita, have done things that you want to do. And your canvas has been pretty much the whole world, because you've made films everywhere from Africa to India to America to other places as well. So when you started out, was this what you wanted to do?
No, I began as an actor, actually.
Really?
Also, I began as a stage actor, and I grew up in Orissa. I was born in Rourkela, and then lived in Bhubaneswar for most of my life. My father was a civil servant. It was theatre that propelled me to perform, mostly the theatre of originally the traditional jatra form of theatre, the mythological theatre that would come through Bhubaneswar. And I just saw how one could transform and transport an audience through a great oral storytelling, but very few props. In the case of the jatra, a little bit of hashish, and I was struck, and I was definitely taken, and that I pursued with Badal Sarkar. I worked with him, the great playwright in Kolkata, as well as Barry John, who was our director of the Theatre Action Group in Delhi. So I actually started as an actor, but then got a scholarship to come abroad to the United States, where I performed, but I had to get credits for things, so I stumbled into, literally without having a design, into filmmaking. But was taught by wonderful gurus of the cinema verite, of the truth tradition, the documentary truth tradition, by Ricky Leacock and Penny Baker, and then started making documentaries, all in India, and finally leading to my first fiction film, which was Salam Bombay, shot right here in the streets. I mean, to be in this hotel is very weird, because it was Bhaikala then, and this is where I did a lot of shooting just around here, in a film that now would be a period film. There's no longer the Bombay that I saw.
It's not even called Bombay any longer. Yeah.
Huh?
It's not even called Bombay. It would be Salam Mumbai. But if there was no Salam Bombay, there would be no Slumdog Millionaire. Around the time when you made that film, at least in Hollywood or the Oscars and places like that, India was an exotic place. They knew nothing about us. So what was that journey like, getting that film made?
Salam Bombay was a life and death story. Seriously, it was not. No one knew me. No one had the money for me. I got a little grant of $150,000 from NFDC, the National Film Development Corporation, for which they sucked my blood dry, but they gave me the money, and went to Channel 4 in England, who matched that money, and that was the money with which I started the film. But the point was that I didn't want to apologize for the cinema. I didn't want to say I'm from the third world and that's why it looks out of focus and that's why it does this. I blew the entire 300,000 on 35mm cameras, on great diffusion, good lighting, but on the streets with street children. So, but having no money really to finish the film in post-production, which is where the French came in. I would shoot in the morning, and at night I would raise money on the phone, because Europe was still 6 hours waking up. And that is how we made that film. It was you know, really difficult, and I never knew from one day to the next whether I would be shooting, but we did. It was 52, there's a line at the end of the film, no guts, no glory, 52 locations, 52 days. What problem? No problem, which is what the kids would tell me. And and that was, I mean, like brutal, but also beautiful, because I got to tell it exactly my way, and also had the great stewardship and collaboration from my wonderful writer and close friend, Suni Tarapurwala, whose The Streets of Bombay are her beat. She's the Bombay wala, I'm the Delhi wala. So, you know, it was a very extraordinary film that we finished, and then we went to Cannes. I had never been to a feature film festival before, but they had invited it, and there we won all the prizes, and thankfully one prize, the Camera d'Or, came with $50,000, which was the exact amount of debt that I had on my head after that film. But the beautiful thing about that film, which doesn't happen often, was the question that I had before making film, like Nandita said earlier to me, like, can art change the world? Can we do with our work something that makes you think of the world differently? And for me, Salam Bombay was a way, always from the first day, to honor street children, to give them back a childhood that they had fled from, but not to just clean them up and give them dinner and then forget about them. And so we formed from the profits of the film Salam Balak Trust, which is still thriving today, 38 some years later. A foundation for street kids. We have several centers for street kids. We house, we educate. We've brought the arts in a big way to Salam Balak Trust. So our kids are puppeteers, our writers, our screenwriters, our performers, as well as going to regular school. And that's extraordinary to change the government policy actually on street kids so many years later. So it's actually something I told Danny Boyle, the director of Slumdog, to get involved with us, because it's not easy to set up these things. We have staff of about 180 social workers now at Salam Balak Trust. He didn't do that route, but it's a route that we've proven has worked, and it really has changed their lives.
It's made a difference, right? Yeah. Absolutely. Nandita, I wanted to talk about the new movie because I was fascinated by what you said, that we live in this convenience economy where things are delivered to our door, and sometimes we believe it happens by magic. Of course it doesn't happen by magic. There are real people who do it, and we don't even think about them. Now it intrigues me that you made a film on that, and the casting intrigues me even more, so tell us about it.
Yeah, in fact, before people ask me about the film, they are like, how come you took Kapil Sharma,
exactly.
a comedian in your kind of a film? Either they think that finally I've succumbed and I'm now doing a commercial, some blockbuster type. But, well, yeah, like I said before, that, during COVID, this is when the story was born. And I was just also fascinated about this whole gig economy thing because, it's not the traditional working space. They are just with their phones. A lot of the people are not so literate. I mean, my generation or even slightly younger are grappling with the phone. There are new things coming up. How do you even deal with that app where the rules are changing? And what are these rules? So the more I started reading about it, I was really fascinated. Initially, I wanted to put an anthology of 4 directors together to just talk about this new India that's kind of now emerging in the last few years. And unfortunately, the anthology kept sort of disintegrating with the other directors, had bigger projects to do. And then my producer, the people we had gone to, Applause Entertainment, their CEO, Mira Nair, said, why don't you expand and make it into a feature film? And I was like, no, I don't understand this rating and algorithm enough to, go beyond the 20 minutes. But he kind of kept nudging me. And then it became not only about the food delivery rider, but his family, his wife, his children, and many other people who form our world that have remained so invisible. We have they're just there. It's like the watchman, the nanny. Sometimes we don't even know the names of the people around us. And so it's not a blame game on big companies, or it's not a blame game on the consumers. It's really a slice of life in 4 days. And I realized that by just telling a story of even one family in a span of 4 days, you can tell so much about the context. Whether it's the religious disparity, whether it's the caste disparity, whether it's the gender disparity, all these things without it sounding messagey or trying to tell something, you can just by laying that world, there is so much that you can tell. And I think that's what the film is about. The film is about these small losses of dignity that people face that we don't realize, but these small acts of indignations. So yeah, that's the film. And Kapil, I don't have a TV. I never watched his show, but something popped up, as they say, serendipitously. It popped up on my screen where he and Karan Johar were presenting some award function. And I looked at him and I thought, wow, he looks like such a normal person. In the film industry, either you have people who really look like actors, or there are a few who don't, but then you kind of know what they're going to do. There is a certain predictability that has come because they've been doing all these realistic roles. And there was something about him which was very vulnerable, real, and even though he's no more an ordinary man, the jokes he was making about ordinary people, they seem to totally connect. So I just found his number, reached out to him. He also asked me that, "Aapne mere bare mein kaise socha is role ke liye?" He also was like a bit shocked with this. And yeah, then we did a few rehearsals, and I said, I have to take out the Punjabiness out of you because you're supposed to come from Jharkhand. So he said, I used to be a serious actor before. So, everybody has a backstory. All of us get labeled so quickly. And there's always something nice and surprising when two people who seemingly come from very different worlds. I always tell him, I said, you know, we would have never met all our lives and we wouldn't have missed each other. But sometimes it's interesting for two people from two different worlds to come, and that collision can bring something quite special.
What was it like, now that the film is ready, what was it like seeing him on screen in this completely unfamiliar role? Not that you'd ever seen him on screen in familiar roles, but even so.
Well, for me, obviously, it's not surprising because I see the journey, but when I see the response, we premiered it at the Toronto International Film Festival, and then we were in Busan, in Kerala. The few people who have seen it, I think the interesting part was that even his hardcore fans, like in Toronto, there are a lot of these South Asians who would never come to a festival. They had only come to see him. And I was worried that they might think that, oh, we are missing that comic element, or we want that. But they said after some time we forgot it was Kapil Sharma. And I think that's the, hopefully
that's the greatest tribute you can pay to an actor, isn't it?
That's the good part, that they kind of got absorbed and involved in the story, and you know what he and Shana Goswami, a wonderful actor who I worked with in Firak, who's also worked with Mira, and she plays his wife. And yeah, I think those little things that happen in our lives, it's not a dramatic, it's not an intense film like Manto, but it's a slice of life, and with a lot of these little nuances that we sometimes forget. And I feel once you watch it, I'm sure you will notice a lot of those invisible people in, you know, in your own life. And if that happens, I would think the film has done its job.
Talking about Kapil and the casting of Kapil Sharma, you're somebody who knows a bit about casting, right? You've been almost acting academy. I've lost count of the number of people I saw first in your movies and now we hear about. We think of Indian actors, but Denzel Washington, his second film was Mississippi Masala with you, right? You've hired people who the world didn't know about because presumably you saw something in them. Tell us about that process.
Actually, it is something that gives me a unique sort of sense of joy to have seen, for instance, Irfan Khan at the age of 18 in a basement of the National School of Drama, and looking at him and speaking with him and wanting to work with him, and he left the school to come and live with me while we were doing Salam Bombay. He was going to be one of the children, and then was too tall to be a kid amongst a group of 5 because they were so malnourished. They only reached his torso. So he ended up with just one scene in Salam Bombay, but we acquired a very long friendship, and I said, I owe you. And then years later, 15 years later, I called him and I said, I have Ashok Ganguly in the namesake for him to play. It was really we thought of him right from the beginning. And it was the namesake and being in that film that gave Irfan the exposure in the West, that then gave him all the big films that he consequently made. But we always worked together in even smaller films. I make a lot of short films, and he played dangerous roles for me, like a gay man in Migration. He played all sorts of roles. He had a sense of real fearlessness about him, and a desire, curiosity. So Irfan was one of them. Riz Ahmed, you know, who's now a huge star. I was in The Reluctant Fundamentalist, one of my films. Again, it was one of his first international film. And I held out for him because Riz had a kind of worldliness and an intelligence, a scathing intelligence, which is what I needed for the character of The Reluctant Fundamentalist, Mohsin Hamid's brilliant book about a young Pakistani who loves America and then ascends America, marries an American, the whole 9 yards, and then 9/11 happens and he's suddenly just a Muslim, and he begins to question that America. And it was Riz who, and in fact it's a little side story, but Pawar, the wonderful Pawar, who was later in Khubsurat, he auditioned for that role for 6 months for me. And I loved him, Fawad Ali Khan. But he had never left, Lahore, and I didn't have that sense of worldliness in him, which is why I went to Riz. But now, of course, Fawad is a big star. And Yeah, so this carries on. I have I think an instinct, being perhaps an actor before myself, working also as cinema verite, as a documentarian and living with real people, seeing how you get what, you can capture their worlds with your camera. I have a kind of instinct for that. And many times I've cast non-actors who then find a profession in acting. So many times. In Monsoon Wedding, it's full of either my family, or one time a woman didn't show up for her role, and I went walking in my park in Vasant Vihar, and there was a Punjabi auntie in her salwar kameez and sneakers walking along, and I said, she looks like somebody who could be that part. And I just walked with her home and asked her to read some lines, and she had brilliant comic timing, and I gave her the role of Shashi auntie in Monsoon Wedding, and that was Kamini Khanna, who was a housewife who had never done any of this. And then she moved to Bombay, and she played the same role of Shashi auntie in about 10 Bollywood movies, and has, so it's a little bit, I think, coming from the streets like I do, coming from the documentary world, as well as working as an actor, that gives me perhaps some kind of instinct to know if you have the spirit for the role, and if you can be responsive also to the world and to direction, you could have the part. And the same with Sarita Chowdhury, who played opposite Denzel Washington in Mississippi Masala. She was a fantastically unvain girl on a bicycle that I saw. I loved her hair. I loved the fact that she didn't give a shit about how she appeared, and she was not vain. Vanity, I think, is a real enemy of an actor. And sadly, actors are sometimes consumed with vanity, and it prevents that, the ego, when the ego comes in front of you, it prevents you from entering a role in the way at least I work. So, so I cast Sarita Chowdhury, who's now actually pretty much of a household word in the States after many years of struggling. So it's something that gives me great joy. It gives me great joy to work with people from the street also. Queen of Katwe is a movie I made in East Africa, in Kampala, very much like Salam Bombay, with street kids, a true story of a young girl who sells water and then becomes a grandmaster in chess and gets out of the slum. And these are all kids that are playing a reality true to themselves, but opposite Lupita Nyong'o, an Academy Award-winning Kenyan actor, and David Oyelowo, another Hollywood actor. And in fact, in those kind of equations, it's the professional actors who have to kind of learn the sense of truth from those who have actually living their lives. So it's that balance between those who actually live that life, opposite those who have to imitate that life, that is a very beautiful exchange. Sometimes it creates an alchemy that I love. So that's also some part of my signature in hindsight, is to be able to equate that world all the time. All the time I do it. Yeah.
You've actually mentioned all of my favorite films of yours, Reluctant Fundamentalist, The Namesake, and a lot of them, you're right, have a lot to do with the casting. I can't imagine The Namesake without Tabu, for instance. It was just such a brilliant performance. But the other one you mentioned, Monsoon Wedding, I don't know how many people have seen it. It was a film, I think, that started with a collaboration between you and somebody you were working with or teaching, who was writing a script, and it's probably
Sabrina Dhawan,
yeah.
one of the smartest students in the Columbia teaching class. I was teaching at Columbia University.
And you spotted her then. Mm-hmm. And now when we think about the big Indian wedding, we think of diamond merchants and 8 days of celebration in Versailles or Florence. But the essence of an Indian wedding, the family dynamics, the family drama, I don't think any pictures captured the way you did in Monsoon Wedding. And I was intrigued because you're taking this very Indian story to the last show business bastion of whiteness, Broadway. How is that going to work?
Oh my God. Yes, so I spent the last 12 years creating a big Broadway-bound musical of Monsoon Wedding, which is now going to open on the 13th of May in New York City, first off-Broadway, and then we hope to be on Broadway by the end of the year. It's been, again, a very long and seriously painstaking odyssey, because I didn't want to do it like the Broadway folks do. I wanted to do it the Desi way, our way. So I went to Vishal Bhardwaj, my friend and great music composer, to do the music for Monsoon Wedding, because it is a true musical, 21 songs where the where the songs propel the story. And I, worked with Sabrina herself, Sabrina Dhawan, the screenwriter, and Arpita Mukherjee, two wonderful writers who could adapt the film into a stage musical. It has its own form, and the only way that one can really test a live musical with an orchestra and actors who sing, dance, and nothing lip sunk about this particular play, and is to test it in audiences. So we opened in 2017 in California. We ran for 100 shows. We then went to Delhi and made it work in a factory just to see which songs work or not. And finally now, we just opened as the World Cup entertainment in Doha for 12 shows last November. And now we're opening in New York City, and I really invite all of you to come, but also know that my main goal is to open it in India, and we hope to come here by the end of this year or early next year, and to have so it's been a really hard journey. I thought I was nuts for a long time, but I was also tired of seeing just white folks on stage. I was tired of Fiddler on the Roof and all these great plays that tell their stories. And it's about time that our stories are told, but our way. And that is what I hope Monsoon Wedding will be for all of us when we open in a couple of months.
Well, look forward to that. Nandita, I want to ask you a vaguely personal question about your work, because you're, of course, a very good director, and of course, as I said, probably the finest actress of your generation. And yet, in all of your work, there's been much more than just acting or directing. Almost everything you've done has focused on people at the margins of our society, people who are ignored, people who you feel should be brought to greater attention. You've done things that make a difference to India as a whole. Even early in your career, whether it was lesbianism, it was the condition of widows or whatever, you've always done things that are not popular, that are not necessarily the obvious things to do. Was that one of your motivations when you got into this field? Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's a conscious choice, it's sometimes just an instinctive choice, the kind of projects that you get attracted to. Like I earlier said, that films wasn't something that I sort of consciously moved towards. And I think when you don't really have a goal, you don't really work towards it. You just, you're more invested in the journey, and you kind of, one thing leads to the other. And if you keep getting attracted to projects that are saying something that resonate with you, you just do it. You're not sort of thinking how this will make me do my next project, but you just do it because you believe in it. And I've been fortunate. I've worked with many amazing directors, some new films. Every time I meet Mira, I tell her, I said, I have to work with you before I die. So she's got that responsibility, and you all are the witnesses. But yeah,
I've got 50 years.
Absolutely. I'm waiting. No rush. But yeah, so for me, like I said earlier also, that it's more a means to an end. So for me to see what the story is, who's the director, and then the role. As an actor, you should be probably looking at the role first. But for me, I just want to enter and be part of those stories. So I think it's more an instinct. And yes, it's true that sometimes I feel I'm not really a true artist, because art in itself doesn't excite me. Of course, when I'm watching a film as well, like sometimes, it's made very interestingly, but if the story is not engaging me, I don't get involved in it. So for me, the story and the form, like what they call the content and the form, both are important. And the form almost sort of, the story is what propels the form, even in the films that I have made. So, yeah, so for me, I think they are not separate, whether it's my politics or whether it's my desire to talk about certain things, whether it's my concerns, whether it's what I write or what I direct or what I act, or I come here and talk. They may seem like different threads, but for me, they're all the same. This comes from a deep compulsion almost to share or to communicate or to find ways to do that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does in a way. It does actually answer what I was getting at. This is called an Ideas of India Summit. You clearly have a very clear idea of India. What would that be? Nandita first.
Oh my God, that's a tough one.
I know, that's why I kept it for the end.
It's a tough one because, I mean, I don't know how to say and how much to say and what to withhold, and I'm not very good at all that. The thing is that India is not one India. I mean, it's such a cliche to say there's unity in diversity, but I grew up in an India which was so inherently diverse that there was no desire to put it in any one framework. I never felt the need to kind of even define it, because by defining you're kind of limiting India. India is everything. You have the most progressive ideas here and you will have the most traditional and bigoted ones. You will have anything, you pick up a cuisine to culture to music to anything that you pick up, there isn't any one India. And as long as we don't homogenize it or try to homogenize it, as long as we don't try to limit it in any one color, literally and otherwise, I think we'll be fine, because we don't have to, every day when you wake up, we don't say, I am an Indian. We don't, because we are in India. We have to maybe define it when we travel outside. So similarly, I feel we are diverse and, and it's okay. We are all very different. We have different ideas, and it's possible to have that churning with different ideas and to respect each other for who we are. So that idea of India, as long as it's preserved, I think we'll be fine. And is it going through its own ups and downs? You know it as much as I do, Veer.
Very nice. Delicately put. Thank you. Mira, I was saying to you outside that when you first sprang to fame, you were referred to in the American media as the Indian director, Mira Nair. You're not. You're just now international. You're just one of the world's best known one, probably one of the world's best directors. You've lived in Africa. You've made films in Africa. You have Hollywood studios chasing you to make films for them. And yet there's something about you that's determinedly Indian. You've never sort of adopted an American accent or tried to be what you're not. So what does Indianness mean to you?
Well, my belief is that, it's because my roots are strong that I can fly, that I can be fluid, and that I can work. I mean, Kampala, Uganda is as much my home as New Delhi, or in fact New York City. So it's because I think I have a real strong sense of self, and it's a sense of self that comes from a lot of what Nandita has said, that we are a syncretic culture. We are a syncretic country, or we were more of one than we are now. And that ability to be and take and to absorb and to be fluidly encompass its culture, its language, especially for me, music is a very important source of just that inspiration that I feed myself with. It's very, very important to me. So it's because of that strength, which also emanates, of course, from family, is that I never went anywhere to become that place. Yeah. I went as myself to see what that place could do with me, or me with the place. That is how I've operated, really, not without much thought, but I never left India to be an immigrant elsewhere. That was never my thing, And I think that has manifested in my work. I always tell whoever wants to learn with me, is like, just refuse to pander, refuse to explain what the dot on the forehead might mean. Your story has to reveal these things, not to pander to what they don't know. Call them to your plate, educate them as you are manifesting your own vision. That's what I try and do, and I think that fierceness of being independent in vision is perhaps what people see in my work, and therefore when you want to have me, by the way, the Hollywood studios don't chase me.
Come on.
They chase me only with certain things.
Vanity Fair, Amelia Earhart, these are not Indian thieves. These are not Indian thieves.
But they know when they come to me that they're not going to get a cookie-cut sort of version of what they would get from other people. That's why they come to me, I suppose, for that sensibility. So I protect that sensibility. I'm not here a gun for hire for your sensibility. I'm here with mine.
It's very hard in this business to have true originals. I think we're very fortunate today. We've had two originals on the stage. We have Mira Nair, one of the greatest directors of our time. And we have Nandita Das, who I've got tired of calling the greatest actress of her generation, especially if she wants to be remembered as a director, I think now, not as
we'll
an
have
actress.
to work together, greatest actress of your generation.
And is well
Now
on her
let's
way,
put
I
that
think, to
label on
becoming...
me.
Yeah, well on your way to becoming one of the finest directors of your time. Please go and see her movie. It's out now, right?
No, it's going to be out. Zwigato is out on 17th of March. Thanks,
Is it-
Veer, for
is-
plugging that
I was
in.
going to tell you to plug it.
Is it in cinemas or is it streaming?
No, it's going to be in theatres. So do look out. What's the theatre close to you? And yeah, go watch it, please, and spread the word. You know, independent cinema like this does need audiences. And I think in absolute numbers, we are enough of us who care about what's happening around us and, you know, want to watch such films.
And Monsoon Wedding later this year, or...
Yeah, Monsoon Wedding opens in New York City on the 13th of May this year, 2 months. And then we hope to bring it to India end of this year or early next year.
Oh.
And then I'll be going into my next film on Amrita Shergill in September this year, shooting it. Yeah.
Wow,
It's going to be amazing.
Lots to look forward to. Two very remarkable people. A big hand for them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Veer.
ABP माझा, उघडा डोळे बघा नीट.